fixed and rerun it at some stage after the news. But I'll take this opportunity to go straight into what is an additional section to the news, because over the last few days in particular, the UK column has been receiving a large amount of information from people who are deeply concerned at what is really happening politically in the country. We've been contacted by retired police officers. Indeed, there were some of those people present at the Telford conference. We've been contacted by retired intelligence service people. We have been contacted by professionals, of course, from the NHS, from within the civil service. And the basic story that is coming out from these individuals is the same. They are saying that there is an agenda to collapse society in this country with a view to helping install a new system of government. Presumably this is based on the Rainbow Coalition, but the UK column has consistently pointed out that it was Tony Blair who was stating that it was his objective to introduce a new system of government through the third sector, the Quango non-government organisations charity sector, where people would be appointed into power, they would not be elected. So that's going back to Tony Blair's day. And we have now got more and more professionals coming forward saying that something very sinister is going on in the country. And some of the most recent reports we've had have concerned the very damaging cuts to British military, where senior military officers are now saying we simply cannot defend the country because David Cameron's coalition is destroying our wherewithal to do that. Now, it's very unusual for senior military officers to speak out. They're normally immensely loyal, but it's now got to the stage we understand that those senior officers are warning and warning again that David Cameron is undermining the ability of this nation to defend itself. Let's couple that with the fact that we now have police officers who are prepared to whistleblow to say that it is absolutely true that senior British police officers, both in the Metropolitan Police and other police forces across the country, have deliberately destroyed information relating to child abuse and child abuse inquiries. They've hidden information, they've lied, they've perjured themselves, all to protect a vicious system of child trafficking, exploitation and abuse, which is clearly well known about by not only British political circles, but also by the higher levels of the British establishment. So faced with this information, which as we say has been increasing, particularly over the last few weeks and certainly the last few days, we felt it was time to really warn the British public what is going to come, particularly if we, the public, don't do the right thing. Now, before I add to that, I would like to just go back to some of the words that I've spoken about in the past, and indeed the UK column, and I'll take you back to 2007 when we gave a talk in Plymouth. I entitled it The Hunt for Red October, which I've used before. And what is the point of this title? Well, it's this. Essentially, if we remember the Tom Clancy book, Hunt for Red October being a submarine, a very dangerous submarine. But the thing about submarines is you don't usually see them. The menace is there, but it's under the surface of the sea, which can look perfectly calm and inviting. So if we know what we're looking for, we can see that there is a beast lurking underneath. Well, what's all this got to do with British politics? What I'm going to say is that many people have been warning over a great many years that something very nasty and subversive was at work within the political system within UK. And I'm going to say today with some force that it's clear to us that that beast is now emerging and showing that the intention is to utterly destroy the normal order and behaviour of this country. Well, who gave some clues? This book is one of the best one, in my opinion, written by a gentleman called Christopher Story, unfortunately no longer with us, the European Union Collective, enemy of its member states. And if you get hold of this, you can download it as a PDF from the internet in this book with immense analysis, a lot of very detailed footnotes as well. Christopher Story described the subversion of British politics in order to take on a new quasi-Marxist, fascist political system, which we are happy to call communitarian. And if you want to know, John has just indicated something has changed with the Labour Party. We know something's changed with the Conservative Party. What we think that is a change from traditional political values to communitarianism, which is effectively a dictatorship with some elements of Marxism and some elements of global corporations and fascism. In this book, you can see this very important table. And what this table describes is what steps were to be taken in order to, first of all, demoralise Britain as a nation, and then to destabilise and finally destroy Britain as a nation. The key areas here, very easy to see: religion, education, media, culture, law and order, family, health, race, labour. Let's have a look at what they said. Well, basically, religion, for example, was going to be politicised and commercialised. It was going to put on par with entertainment. Education was going to encourage permissiveness and relativity. Media was going to monopolise people's thoughts. It was going to manipulate people and discredit. And my goodness, doesn't that simply sum up the BBC to date? And have a look at culture. We were to be swamped with false heroes and role models. And of course, at the moment, we've got that as everything from footballers to Lady Gaga and some pretty unpleasant stuff going on in the pop industry. What was that going to achieve, which is the right-hand column? Well, just messing around with those areas, the intent was to create an ignorant, uninformed and addictive mass of people who really got a death wish because they got no morality to sustain them. But look at law and order. It was going to make legislative, not moral, rights versus obligations, and they were going to get in amongst the security services and the armed forces, and that was going to be collapsed to lead to defencelessness. Foreign policy, we could only work with the permission of friends. We see Tony Blair, David Cameron doing that within the EU. And we follow it through. Once we get into the population, we're going to be taken off the land. And of course, what has the UK column in the British Constitution Group been reporting over many weeks now, that people's property is literally being stolen from under their feet through corrupt courts. And this was going to be a programme that eventually was increased until it led to destabilisation of the country. So the first part of the programme, due to last about 25-30 years, I'm going to suggest that our research and knowledge shows that we're now entering the destabilisation phase. And what are we looking at? We're looking at trouble with the economy, trouble in politics, trouble in society. And in this document from the 1970s, from Thomas Schuman, it even uses the word Big Brother. But where does this take us? Well, it takes us to crisis. And what does that mean? It actually means violence on the streets. And if you think, well, there's no problem because it ends with this, with normalisation being achieved, then you need to understand that normalisation under the Marxist regime means you do not have any say. You are the state. And if you disagree with the state, you go to a psychiatric unit or the Gulag. That is normalisation. Well, have a look at these comments. The Scotsman: if Britain were like Nazi Germany, the Muslim population in Britain would not be as numerous as it is today, would it, Dr. Nazim? Muslim chief says Britain police state like Nazi Germany, or in this case, the Nazi calling the non-Nazis Nazis. But Mohammed Nazim, chairman of Birmingham Central Mosque, urged Muslims to show restraint. crumbling spires Islam. One recent tradition of this country is for Nazim to compare the UK with Nazi Germany and to dismiss the threat of Islamic terrorism as a government plot. The Telegraph raids in Birmingham were comparable to the Nazis' persecution of the Jews. A spokesman for Mr. Cameron said it was clear that Dr. Nazim enjoyed, what it added there was enjoyed sort of stirring up trouble. An Islamic community leader today compared the political situation in Britain with Nazi Germany. And all of these articles were attacking this gentleman who we invited to give a talk in Plymouth in 2007. And Dr. Mohammed Nazim was the chairman of Birmingham Central Mosque. And in an excellent presentation, he warned an audience which was largely professional, probably Christian, but based obviously in the Plymouth area as opposed to the Midlands. Dr. Nazim warned very clearly that something very dark and evil was starting to eat away at the political and democratic structure of Britain. And he was brave enough to stand in front of the audience in Plymouth to warn again and again that Britain was descending into a vicious police state where the police, in some circumstances, could be compared to Nazi Germany. Now, I'm going to say to you, John, we've talked about the police smashing their way into people's houses to take their children with social services. We've had police smashing into houses in order to take property. This is the reality of Britain in 2015, and this gentleman was warning about it.
And they ignore their code of conduct.
Indeed.
Which is protect the public. You know, and they don't do that. We had a case yesterday, didn't we, with an individual that had a little child. She had a little child with her, and they were trying to smash their way into the house whilst the child is crying, and the mother's obviously deeply upset, and the police are assisting with such criminality. So they're creating a crime, but they believe that their oath of office and their code of conduct doesn't apply to them anymore. I don't know why that is. And again, I'll mention Melanie Shaw, because I know a few people wanted me to do that. And Melanie's situation, they acted like Nazis. The police did it in Nottingham, and they dragged her away, and these trumped up claims that she broke the laws are utter rubbish, because it's about paedophilia, and she was another whistleblower getting involved in there. So just to push it in there, on Sunday there's going to be an event in Peterborough, especially for Melanie Shaw. So if we can get that out there as well, guys, and if you can help out and support them. I believe Tom Crawford is also doing a speech up there about corruption and the system, so that's quite important. And the footage, Mark Anderson, that will be, I believe, will be 3 o'clock when we can get that out on air. Yeah, I'm told. So look forward to that, because it's a good interview.
Indeed. So if we stay on this, we are remembering that a very brave man, Dr. Mohammed Nazim, was prepared to stand up in front of a largely white audience in Plymouth and warn again that Britain was sliding into a vicious police state. What happened? Britain's press and media turned on him. They accused him of all sorts of things. They ridiculed him. They laughed at him. But what that man said then, we are now experiencing now. And I'll add to what John has just said. Of course, the UK column has reported a number of individuals, mainly women, who have tried to expose paedophile rings. What has the British state done with them? It has put them in psychiatric units and forcibly medicated them, their crime standing up to try and protect children. Well, if you don't want to believe the warning from Dr. Mohammed Nazim, perhaps you might like to take the warning from this very brave gentleman, Harry Beckoff, unfortunately no longer with us. This is a picture of him on his 100th birthday. He was formerly working at Bletchley Park. He was a cipher officer, and a very good one. He knows what the Nazi regime was about. And here is one of Harry's books in which Harry is warning about the creation of effectively a new dictatorship in Europe, which was going to suck Britain in. So if we just go very simply through the sorts of things these individuals and many others have been warning about, it's to do with this. It's an attack on our society. We're looking at demoralising the nation. We're certainly looking at destroying the family, because if you weaken or destroy the family, individuals are much easier for the state to get to grips with. And of course, we want to undermine our youth so that they do not grow into strong, well-adjusted adults. We're going to promote sexual promiscuity, and we're going to sexualise children in school. That is happening. It's happening on a day-by-day, year-by-year basis. We're destroying proper education, so children leave school ill-equipped to deal with the basics of a good life. We're undermining the police, we're retraining them, we're reframing them to be aggressive and paramilitary. That is in our face. We are undermining and destroying the armed forces, we're destroying the NHS, collapsing the economy, we're undermining and collapsing the rule of law and national institutions. And this is where we get to the key material. We're dividing people in communities and antagonising them. Into UK column from a very own political establishment is in order to create violence on the streets, and that of course would give the perfect opportunity to bring in draconian laws, curfews, to make sure that liberty has been stripped away at one go. Now, the reason we have given that summary is because the intelligence coming into UK column from a great many professional people is that the agenda is to create violence on the streets by using division between people over the subject of child abuse. And in particular, the targeted area will be relations between the wider Christian community in this country and Muslims and Asians. And how is this going to be created? We've had retired police warning us about this. We've got retired military people warning us about this. A effectively establishment agenda to have these people at each other's throats, blaming the other side for child abuse. What better example than Thames Valley Police, where of course it has only been the UK column that warned and reported again and again that when a very brave Asian gentleman, a good Samaritan, went to Thames Valley Police some 80 times to report that white men were abusing white children, Thames Valley Police took no proper action and stood in the sidelines while effectively this gentleman was abused, hounded out of his job and victimised. At the same time, of course, there was massive publicity at the convictions of Asians who had been involved in child abuse, and indeed the media such as the BBC took great delight in even going to local mosques to ask Muslims what they thought about child abuse and the paedophiles. And as the Muslims said at the time, why don't you visit churches when the abuse of children is carried out by white people? Well, of course, the reason Britain's media were doing this was in order to create hostility and division between communities. This brings us to Rotherham. This is a little collection of articles. We've got The Guardian here saying the government is to take over Rotherham Council after damning child exploitation report. Notice nobody has been convicted, nobody has been brought into court about this abuse. And here's the BBC. It can't even sort out abuse in its own organisation, but they're happy to promote that 1,400 children have been abused by gangs of men in Rotherham. And in many of their reports, of course, they're happy to brand those people as Asians and Muslims. We've got a headline here in the article I've just shown you. It's loud and clear, networks of Asian men. And yet what we are not seeing is any full and proper investigation by the police as to the gangs of white men, including people in the political circles. That's all being ignored. The Telegraph here, the same thing, 1,400 children exploited by Asian gangs while authorities turned a blind eye. So Asian, but we can make no progress on Elm Guest House. We can make no progress on Dolphin Square. We can make no progress on white abusers associated with British Parliament. Well, let's enter the Crown Prosecution Service. Remember that Crown Prosecution Service under Alison Saunders worked extremely hard to ensure that abuse victim Melanie Shaw of Beechwood Children's Home, Nottingham, was banged up in prison on very dubious charges. She's still there. But here is the Crown Prosecution Service boasting about the Asian names that have that have been sentenced as a result of child abuse. So the state focus is Asian, Muslim, Islam, paedophilia. That's the message being put across. There is an underlying message that the only abusers are in fact men. Well, this is a lie because, of course, statistics show that roughly 50% of child abusers are women, not according to the British press. And we have a focus on the Asian community. We have total protection of abuse rings being run by some pretty powerful white men. Well, that brings us back to the silly man on the train, because here's David Cameron on the left saying with regard to Operation Bullfinch, the police investigation into the abuse of children in Oxford, more needs to be done to tackle child abuse. But of course it took very brave Simon Danczuk to say, well, actually, this is David Cameron who's saying there's nothing to see, move on, there's no child abuse in Westminster. And Simon Danczuk, we have to say, is apparently coming under vicious pressure from the establishment in order to get him to back off from exposing paedophiles within Westminster or people who've been previously involved as members of Parliament. A lot of pressure coming on this man. On one occasion in the early days, of course, he had the wheel nuts loosened on the wheels of his car. Deliberate attempt, I would guess, for him to suffer harm or injury. Well, David Cameron is clearly starting to run very worried at the moment, and the UK column reported that he'd been enlisting military police to help protect him. If we just pop him up on screen, Nick, if we can. Thank you. There he is. Well, what's he been up to? This was the key bit. As the police start to have internal problems between the police who are covering up child abuse and the police who want to expose it, obviously they're a little bit uncertain for Mr. Cameron. So he's gone to bring in the military police for his protection. And we said that additional Royal Navy personnel are being trained in close protection to support those people. We asked this question some time ago: is he frightened by the British voters, or had he been a naughty boy in Russia? Well, we're going to say that David Cameron has been naughty in both areas. But what seems to be happening now in Westminster is absolute terror as more and more information comes to the surface over child abuse connected with British politicians. And this brings us to the reports of the professionals who've been kind enough to contact us over the last few days, because they believe it's their personal assessments, not factual, but it's their assessments, that there is an agenda to create violence on the streets, and they're saying that that agenda will be focused on Rotherham, and the agenda will be based on accusations of child abuse from the Asian community. Meanwhile, white so-called Christian abusers are totally ignored by the mainstream press and media. This information we thought was so significant that we wanted to make people aware of it. Of course, UK column has consistently said that if we want to correct the political system at the moment, people must remain peaceful, we must keep people together, and we certainly must not allow this devious, subversive criminal cabal in Westminster to undermine relations between good people within communities. So that is our warning today, and I will end on the fact that we have warned time and time again that the real political agenda in this country is treason. Happily, it's not just the UK column that's saying this. This was Breitbart pointing out that when the army may be cut to 50,000, the smell of treason is becoming offensive, and they are absolutely right reporting here that we are witnessing treason. UK column has reported everything from the British military being given to the French, to British students being betrayed to debt, slavery, and public spending decimated to pay for a banking mafia. Let's look at the full horrible picture. Of course, this was a mix of Cameron and Nick Clegg, but we continue have warned of treason. And if we go back to 2008, with one of our earlier newspapers, we were predicting back then that Britain was going to be abolished. We were warning of treason, and we actually said that the path to the abolition of any form of democracy in this country was the fact that Parliament would be closed on the excuse of refurbishment works. I think we got that right. Well, we'll end you on this. We've been very sad at the disastrous, pathetic reporting by the Daily Mail recently. We shouldn't have been surprised because in this edition of the UK column, we reported how the Daily Mail ran a major article on the need to get rid of plastic bags and ignored 3,000 demonstrators outside Parliament who were trying to warn that Britain was being subsumed into a dictatorship. There's the word treason again. We've used it time and time again. Our warning today is that from information we are receiving, there appears to be an intent by unknown people within the British government and establishment to help foment violence on the streets. We believe that target area is Rotherham. We believe the subject area is child abuse. We would like to say to people of all colours, backgrounds, religions, do not fall into this trap. It's up to all of us to work together to restore law and order, the Constitution and common law to this country. That's it from me. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you take our warning seriously. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Debt Free TV, in association with GetOutOfDebtFree.org.